My Hero Academia has a variety of villains, but when it comes to the question of the main antagonist, the final threat that Izuku must overcome in his quest to become the strongest hero, we have yet to get a really solid idea. Of course, we can assume it will be Tomura. As the head of the League of Villains and the person in the most direct opposition of All Might, he certainly has the makings of a series villain. However, in this totally real, serious, definitely legitimate theory video, I'm going to prove that there is someone else who can fulfill the role, and who most likely will as the series progresses. And no, it's not Bakugo. By the way, this video contains spoilers of both the anime and the manga of My Hero Academia up to about chapter 100, so if you don't want to be spoiled, it'd be best to leave now. First of all, we need to quickly talk about All for One. As the creator of One for All and its main opponent, he is currently the single biggest threat to peace in the series. However, as in their most recent battle, All Might and All for One effectively destroyed each other, passing on the torch of their powers to the next generation, it falls to them to produce the next great hero and villain. Although Tomura has seemingly been groomed as the successor to All for One, and is the one who will ultimately bring an end to One for All, what if there's someone else who can fit the bill better? This is where Neito Monoma comes in. As a member of Class 1B at UA, his copy ability gives him the power to take and use any other person's quirk, and use it for up to 5 minutes. This quirk, more than anything else in the series, gives us the biggest hint toward Monoma's true identity, and his future in the series. As shown with characters such as Bakugo and Todoroki, quirks are often inherited from parents, and can become stronger or even mutate into something entirely new. By the same token, it must be possible for someone to inherit a weaker, watered-down version of their parent's quirk, which either works less effectively or in a slightly different way. From seeing Tomura's past in the manga, we also know that at some point in the past, as All for One aged, he'd begun searching for a successor, finding a young Tomura and indoctrinating him into his organization. Given that Monoma is 15 years old, his birth most likely took place at around the same time period that All for One had begun searching for a successor. With this in mind, it is possible that, in this attempt, All for One also gave birth to a son. This is Monoma. From here, it's possible his mother fled with her child, hiding him from All for One and shielding him from his origins. However, I find it even more likely that All for One abandoned him at some point early in his life after witnessing the weakness of his quirk, at which point he discovered and began grooming Tomura as his successor. So what does this mean for the future of My Hero Academia? Despite his vindictive and contrary personality, I don't believe Monoma is evil. At least not yet. As we can assume he spent his life away from the influence of All for One, he most likely holds heroic aspirations. However, with his jealousy and competitive nature in mind, it's easy to envision a scenario where he travels down this path. Although All Might's defeated him, All for One isn't gone. While he's imprisoned, I can't imagine we're not going to see his influence in the story again. As Izuku has inherited One for All, it's likely that Tomura is going to need to gain more strength from All for One in order to stand up to Izuku's power. With this in mind, I predict we're either going to see All for One escape from prison to make this happen, or possibly even see Tomura break into the prison to get his master out and inherit his power. Personally, I think the heroes have probably realized this too, and with the threat of the most dangerous villain the world has ever seen breaking out, wouldn't it be best for them to neutralize that threat before he has the chance? While they could simply choose to trust in the security of the prison, if they had the available option of taking All for One's power away from him, this could be a viable course of action in the case that the prison can't hold him. And this is where Monoma comes in. His quirk is essentially a weaker version of All for One's. It can copy anyone's quirk, but only for 5 minutes. But 5 minutes is all he would need to copy All for One, and to use this ability to steal the original quirk from its master, for good. So, why would the pro heroes do this? While it may seem unlikely, it can't be argued that Monoma wouldn't be easier to keep tabs on and control than All for One, and assuming they already believed All for One would attempt to break out, giving those powers to Monoma could be a more desirable situation. Now, from here I see two possibilities. 1. Monoma, now in possession of the most powerful quirk aside from One for All, uses his newfound power to become the top hero next to Izuku. This is the best case scenario, but of course not one I see as very likely to happen. And then there's the other option. Monoma uses his near limitless power to begin stealing quirks, and in doing so switches over to the side of the villains. Now, as I said before, I don't believe that Monoma as we know him now is evil. However, I think there are many ways for Horikoshi to show us how this transition could take place. For one, Monoma is already shown to be both jealous and a bit cutthroat, with his main aspiration being to prove his superiority to Class 1A. With All for One in his possession, this would normally be an easy task if it weren't for the fact that Izuku, the only person with power to match Monoma's, belongs to that class. In this situation, Monoma could easily begin to seek greater power as a way to match Izuku's strength, and, as we've seen with All for One, seeking power for power's sake is one of the hallmark traits of a villain. Additionally, by its very nature, All for One is a selfish quirk. To function, it requires the user to steal the abilities of others for their own personal gain. Monoma, having already possessed a similar quirk, is likely to adapt to this aspect very quickly, which could lead him down a path of rampant quirk theft and, ultimately, to a quest for personal power. Beyond this, the eventual revelation that All For One was his father could have a direct effect on both Monoma's view toward his power, and also his affiliation in terms of heroes and villains. Here I also want to quickly mention one more possibility, that Monoma has been working with All For One this entire time, and that his theft of his quirk was part of their larger plan for Monoma to take his place as his successor. Although this is the less likely scenario, had Monoma discovered All For One's identity as his father earlier and decided to join him, it could provide a justification for this course of action, as well as reveal the identity of the traitor at UA. Okay, so with that long-winded explanation out of the way, to summarize, here's my prediction for the future of My Hero Academia. Monoma, the abandoned son and successor of All For One, is tasked by the pro heroes to use his quirk, a weaker version of All For One, to first copy All For One, and then to use this new power to steal the quirk from his father for good. Although this was meant as a method to keep the quirk from being utilized by the villains, Monoma's jealousy of Izuku and desire for power leads him to begin stealing and gathering quirks as a way to become stronger than his rival, the successor of One For All. In this way, Monoma can develop into a villain stronger than any seen so far in the series, supplanting Tomura as the main antagonist, and cementing himself as a direct foil of Izuku, who must be defeated in Izuku's quest to become the strongest hero. And at the end here, I would also like to mention that I finished this video without looking up if anybody else had actually come up with a theory like this, and it turns out I'm not at all original, so I'm going to put some links down to 2 Reddit threads that I found with a really quick Google search. Some people going into this, you can read up on that, see what they think. But other than that, that's about all I have for this totally real, 100% serious anime theory, so be sure to let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts, or if I missed any evidence. Thank you all for watching, and be sure to stay tuned for the next theory.